This is part 4 of our lesson on solving polynomial equations. We just finished reviewing how to solve using quadratic formula, and we learned how to use the quadratic formula for equations that have higher exponents. And now we're going to talk about solving by factoring. So when you solve by factoring, the most important thing is that you need this side, or at least one side of the equation, to equal 0. So when something is in factored form, it is basically a multiplication question, right? We are multiplying things together, and we want to know what makes it equal 0. Why does it need to equal 0? Well, it's easy to find things that multiply to 0. Because if I was multiplying 3 things together, as long as one of those things was a 0, it would all become 0. So if I had 5 times 2, that's 10 times 0, then that automatically makes it 0. So if you have it in factored form and you want to try to figure out what makes it equal 0, all you have to do is figure out what makes each individual bracket equal 0. If we were trying to solve for what makes it equal 30, then you have to try to figure out different combinations of numbers that would equal 30, and it's kind of tricky to do. But it is really easy to figure out things that multiply to 0, because guaranteed one of the numbers has to be a 0. So I'm going to start with my first equation here. I've got x times 4x minus 1 times x plus 2 squared times x minus 9 equals 0. So I don't want to use quadratic formula because it's all in brackets. To use quadratic formula, it would have to have the right format and it would have to be all multiplied out. And I don't want to multiply this out. I also wouldn't solve by rearranging because I have 1, 2, 3, 4 different terms with x's and they're all being multiplied together. So just rearranging isn't going to work. Rearranging works well when you only have one term that has an x. So I'm not going to rearrange. I'm not going to use quadratic formula. So I'm going to solve by factoring. That's my only other option right now. Is this factored? Is an important question to ask yourself. So factored things are multiplied. This is x times 4x minus 1 times x plus 2 squared times x minus 9. So I don't have any addition or subtraction in between the brackets. So this is already factored. So if I want to know what makes this equal 0, either the x is going to equal 0, and then 0 times anything is 0. The 4x minus 1 would equal 0, and then that times everything else is 0. The x plus 2 squared might equal 0, and then that times everything else would be 0. And then x minus 9 could be 0. So I'm going to individually look at each one of these and set them equal to 0. So what makes x 0? What makes 4x minus 1 equal 0? What makes x plus 2, and I'm going to do the squared for now, equal 0? And what makes x minus 9 equal 0? Well, up first, x equals 0. I don't have to rearrange anything. It's just x equals 0. If I were to put 0 into this equation, I would get negative 9 in this bracket. I would get 2 squared, which is 4 in this bracket. I would get negative 1 in this bracket, and then times 0. 0 times anything is 0, which would make it work out. 4x minus 1, I would add 1 to the other side to get 4x equals 1, and then divide by 4 to get x equals 1 over 4. So if I put 1/4 into this bracket, it would equal 0, and then anything times 0 is automatically 0. Up next, x plus 2 squared equals 0. I would start with the square, and I would square root both sides. Now, when I square root 0, it would technically be plus and minus the square root of 0, but what is the square root of 0? The square root of 0 is just 0. Can I have plus and minus 0? Not really. 0 is just 0. So square root of 0, 0, and then take away 2. I get x equals negative 2. And then up last, x minus 9 equals 0. I would add 9 to both sides to get x equals 9. So there are 4 different values that will make my equation equal 0, 0, 1/4, -2, and 9. It is always a good idea when you have multiple answers to just write a quick little therefore at the end. So therefore x equals 0. You can even do it like this. You can say 0, 1/4, -2, and 9. Okay, that one was easy. It was already factored. You can join us in the next example to look at one that's not factored.